Hi everyone, I'm Neil. I'm from Primark and I look after the service assurance function, which includes the SIAM team, CSI, and some elements of controls and kind of reporting and governance. So I'll just take you through maybe our journey to date, what we've done, where we want to go, what all the issues, problems we've encountered to date, how we're doing right now, and then the next steps in terms of the evolution to our target operating model. So just a quick few numbers at a glance, just to give you a bit of context on Primark. 17 countries, we have 464 stores. I think that's reasonably up to date. Plan is that will be close to, I think, 600 by 2030. In addition, we've got a digital offering. We've got click and collect in a number of regions. Sorry, things going off here. In the UK and Ireland, which will be expanded to other territories over the coming year, which is going quite well. We'll also be expanding with a franchise partner over the next couple of years, which is expected to be a significant growth for the business. As you can see there from the map, so we've quite a few countries and languages to support, which gives us our current. This is our starting point, really, in terms of our
Neil, your session's not progressing there, I think.
Is that working?
Yeah, that's fine. You're on slide 3 now. Yeah.
Slide 3, apologies. Yes. So this is kind of probably from about late 2022, what our starting point was, why we chose SIAM, where we're going with this, and what all the different, I suppose, the complexities and issues we had. So as you can see here from the screen, one of our big challenges in Primark was the growth, which is great from a business perspective, but it presented an awful lot of challenges from a technology perspective in terms of the way we had grown organically. So you can see here we had our starting point is multiple service desks, both with partners, HCL and retail, who are our Fujitsu looking after our retail estate. We have EPAM looking after the digital side. So we've got multiple desks, multiple SIAM teams, and also multiple ITSM tools, which presents a lot of challenges around reporting and managing, etc. This layer here, again, just represents multiple different tools, partners, and teams that are looking after the various elements of alerting and monitoring. And then the last box is just representing a fairly significant amount of vendors that we've built up over the last 10 years or so. That's only a snapshot. Obviously, there's probably dozens and dozens of vendors we have in terms of strategic vendors. And again, very similar to Caroline's point, we've tried now to classify in terms of what are our tier 1, 2, and 3, both vendors and partners, as well as services, just to try and focus how we're tailoring and delivering those SIAM services, and what the I guess the extent of the reach in terms of SIAM is. So a couple of things there. I suppose I'd comment on the right hand side, the multiple desks, very high ticket volumes, interactions. We've probably got about 15,000 coming into service desks a month. Of those, about 5,000-6,000 service requests. We have 2 ITSM tools, which presents a lot of challenges. Whilst we went live with ServiceNow in 23, we still have a lot of way to go in terms of our foundation data and setting up things like full service mapping or CMDB, and the foundation data, which covers vendors, services, all the SLA commitments, etc. So quite a lot of work to do, which means that we've had lots of manual reporting and limit constraints in terms of what we can automate. High volume of vendors and services, probably somewhere in the region of 400 services defined in the architectural tools. Of those, there'd be a chunk that are probably interfaces. There's a lot of gray IT, and we probably have around 150 applications defined within ServiceNow from a corporate and a retail perspective. So again, lots of work to do on tidying that up, tiering our systems, completing that tiering of services, applications, vendors, etc. And we have a lot of change, both in terms of operational change, going through the SIAM team is probably about 400 a month, but in terms of the organization, nothing stands still. It's very pacey, constant move, constant projects been fired up, expansions, new partners, new services. So it's a very, very busy, constantly evolving environment. And like most businesses, huge cost challenges, particularly since post-COVID, things like supply chain, transport costs, still very, very high. We've been operating are probably looking at about 10% operating profits. So, every 100 grand we spend in IT, that's $1 million our colleagues in retail have to spend. So there's constant pressures on automations, reducing our costs, simplifying our landscape, whilst at the same time facilitating a huge amount of business change. Finally, in terms of the global spread, we have quite an inconsistent colleague experience. And one of the things that the business wants from the top down is to ensure that we're getting not just a good experience, and again, we'd be looking at things like XLAs, moving from SLA to XLAs, but that experience that we give across the board to all our different colleagues in different regions is experience, or is a consistent experience and a good experience. So that's kind of our background. Where do we want to be? This is our target operating model. Again, what you would imagine we want, we've kind of 4 core pillars. One is a single global service desk, providing that consistent colleague experience. A single global SIAM function. So we're going to build out our partner HCL is starting now to pull in those, and I'll come back to how we're doing with that expansion shortly. Service delivery managers, again, quite dispersed at the moment. The focus is now to get a regional focus delivering global services, and been fed by the SIAM team so that their day-to-day and their key focus is around CSI and SIP and improving services, rather than kind of a hodgepodge what they're currently involved in, whether it could be supporting major incidents, supporting problems, etc. So we really want to make sure that the SIAM team, which is starting to take shape now, is pulling an awful lot of that work away from the likes of our engineering managers or service delivery managers, and allowing them to focus on the value add and things like SIP, CSI for their business customers. Finally, then, one ITSM tool set, giving us a single pane view, and very much underpinned by automation. So again, you can see in here, this is just the top view here is how currently our business is split between things like retail, digital, data and analytics, our supply chain and buyers, etc. That may change over time. We will probably see new pillars or shift as the business models change. But fundamentally for us, it is all about a single pane, single service desk, single SIAM team. And underneath there, we have a new function, the command center, which is done by one of our partners, TCS. So again, consolidating all of that all of that monitoring, alerting, looking at our automation opportunities, very much linked into and feeding the SIAM MIM team and other teams, so that we get that automation and efficiencies been driven. And again, we start to collapse and look at our vendors, focusing on the strategic vendors and getting away from the spread that we currently have. So how are we currently structured? And again, this is evolving. I'll come back to it shortly, but this is how we have been set up since probably around 2022, which is when we started with the HCL team. One of the themes for me, I think, in terms of our SIAM journey is the first couple of years, and I'll show you some of the stats shortly, is very much focused on a reactive, dealing with things like major incidents, getting stabilization across changes. And that's worked very well, and we've got some good news stories. Where we're trying to shift to now is the value add, driving the problem into CSI, getting our knowledge databases working, getting into automation and shift left. So getting away from the burning house and firefighting and major incidents, which has gone very, very well. And now we want to shift. And you can see that's actually reflected in terms of the team structure. You can see it's very, very top heavy in terms of major incident management, where we have 10, 11 MIMs. We've got 3 full-time change managers, again, which is quite high, but our stats and the volume of change has necessitated that to ensure that we have a very low failure rate. And then the numbers start to drop again across into problem and knowledge, asset service requests, and SLM and CSI. On the Primark side, we've got a continuous service improvement manager, and only in the last 4 or 5 months, which has been a massive improvement for us, is a service assurance and governance lead. So this lady, Elaine, is working very closely with Nikita in the SIAM team, and we've had a really massive improvement in terms of our reporting capability and what's driving out of that, and getting to that shift from reactive into proactive. And I'll show you some of those slides shortly. So that's our current team structure. In terms of the journey to date, some of the key ones, or some of the key events I would call out. So 2023, we went live with ServiceNow. We previously had quite an old ITSM tool that we hadn't invested in. So it was a real struggle. It had been developed very organically. There was no workflow. Service catalog was very, very difficult to use. Our change management was all manual, done via SharePoint. And we had expected, when the HCL team went live with our corporate SIAM in, I think, September 22, the expectation was that ServiceNow would be available, but unfortunately we had a delay on that for about 6 months. So it was a struggle for the team, but they played a blinder on that one, and we went live in May 23. So that was the first key one, and that allowed us to start looking at a lot more data, quality, looking at catalogs, automated change, automated approvals. So that was a first massive improvement in terms of the service into technology, our suppliers, and also the wider colleagues. The first time they had a good portal. Whilst we're not really driving it, we have a VA in there. We've got much more detail around the catalog items that they can choose. Still a little bit struggling with the other category, but again, massive differences. The next probably key one for us was our other big partner aside from HCL is TCS, and they have a fairly significant application management contract with us. So they now front probably around 80 plus applications in various different buckets in terms of full development down to manage on behalf of. So again, from a SIAM perspective, that was quite a significant departure for us, because that allowed us to look at that footprint of all the individual and the tier 3 and 4, or tier 2, 3, 4 vendors, which are now being fronted by a tier 1 vendor. So in one way, it simplified our SIAM ecosystem, but it also adds in complexities around governance and reporting, which I'll come back to. Our first consolidation then was we took HR level 1 service desk and the SIAM in July. We've then taken over the retail L1 and SIAM in September, which was the first really key one for us, and that's gone very, very well. So all of our US retail stores now, service has all been centralized into the corporate and one single SIAM team. So we still have the rest of the world, which is routed through the Fujitsu desk and the Fujitsu SIAM team, but the first region is now been managed since September and is going very, very well. November, we had a CSI launch using ServiceNow. Again, that's been quite a transformative piece of work, where we've got the service delivery managers, our vendors, and the SIAM team now pulling out of problem, incident, any of the processes, any of the problems that are coming out every week and every month. We've a funnel into the CSI module in ServiceNow, and that's really starting to drive, I'll show you some of the slides, drive some improvements. And we also got that new reporting lead in. So very key in terms of our ability to report, our ability to start to shift away from the reactive into the SIPs, the CSI, and feeding the service delivery managers in the business. We've made some progress in terms of our ITSM maturity, mainly around major incident management and change. Our long-term goal is to move towards DevOps as the business moves into a product model. That is going quite slow, to be fair. There's some pockets of the business are working very much in product mode in retail and digital. Other areas are quite behind. So again, we're going to have to flex and most likely retain idle change for another year plus, but we're hoping to start a DevOps train next, probably to start the next calendar year, I would suspect at this stage. So we'll probably be operating in 2 different modes of change management, with the view then to collapse into full DevOps. So we've made some changes in terms of, the ITIL process to make it a little bit more streamlined, so we can help pull in the digital folks. So things like lead times, simplification in terms of the workflow approvals. So we make some incremental changes until we're ready to pull everyone into DevOps next year. Also made some changes around our major incident process, again, pulling our vendors a little bit closer with the view to reducing the overhead on Primark engineering and Primark delivery teams. And then we're hoping to start, we had expected to be doing it this already or in the next month, but there's been a bit of a delay on the next consolidation phase, where we'll be taking 13 countries in Europe, migrating away from the Fujitsu service desk and SIAM, and then pulling them into the central SIAM team, which will be, again, another significant chunk of work. So that's kind of where we are to date. That's the journey to date. In terms of how we're doing, I won't go into too much detail. Obviously, there's reams of monthly reporting and good news stories, but might just show you a couple of the key charts that for me are very important, in how we can illustrate what SIAM has done for us, how it's working, and where we're going to take it. And these will be the type of slides that are obviously being used by tech and our own department to track and manage for the priorities each month. But these are also going to the exec team, so they can see exactly where we're going, what the improvements we've made, and how the stability is working across the system under that SIAM umbrella. So you can see here a couple of really good news stories, and you can see why at the start I said the first year to 2 years was very much focused on operational stability, getting our numbers down and getting change in control. You can see there the graphs are going the right way. So we got a lot of positive feedback in terms of driving down those numbers, and our change, as you can see here, we generally are under 2%, with an average in the last 6 months, I think, of about 1.5, 1.8 change failure. So at a kind of a headline, CIO, is everything working? Do we have anything on fire? We do, obviously, every month, but the graphs are all going the right direction, and we're really chipping away at those major incidents every month. Particularly on the retail side here, you can see massive drop from highs, and I think August 22, I think, was our highest yet. So a lot of good news stories coming out there. This slide here is probably the really most important one for me in terms of promoting what SIAM is doing. And it reminded me of Claire, you had some slides around, I think they were Gartner slides, showing the areas where SIAM can provide improvements. This is the one that brings it to life for me in terms of selling it to the likes of the execs and vendor management. Obviously, I've anonymized the vendors here, but these would be our kind of nine of the strategic vendors that we have. We may have 1 or 2 others, but these would be our core vendors. And this is a slide that just illustrates how are we doing in terms of the SLAs, what SIAM is doing for us. And before, 6 months ago, this is something that we were never able to illustrate before. So at its core, in terms of putting its arm around all our vendors, managers, and our services, this is a really good single pane view of this is what SIAM is doing for us, and this is how our vendors are performing. So that was a really great slide to be able to show both vendor management and the exec teams. The other one I just very quickly show again is just a sample of what we're doing now with CSI. So again, we've come away from this time last year. The slides were all about how many things did we break, how long did it take to fix them, what was the impact, what was the availability outage, what was the commercial loss, etc., etc. So whilst we absolutely have to keep all those things going and report on our core SLAs, these are now the slides where we can start to illustrate, here's our pain points, here's problem, we've grouped our big hitters together, and then feeding in from problem into CSI. This is what we're doing. Here's the areas where we're focusing on. Here's the target outcomes, and here's the individual services and vendors and how they're all performing and what they're delivering. So this has been met with really positive reception, and we've only been able to show this probably in the last 2 months to the leadership team, but we're really getting positive feedback, and we're only kind of starting on this one. So there's a lot more. We're seeing the numbers ramp up every month, so I'm expecting this to be a really good news story. So they're just kind of some of the key flavors in terms of how we're doing. And just in terms then of I guess for me, the key points that I'd probably call out in our particular position in terms of the SIAM team that or the model that we've chosen, what tripped us up, what we're tweaking, what we're changing. Just for me, I've kind of bundled them into these 3 areas that seem kind of the logical fit for me. So they could kind of sit anywhere, and but these as I say, these are the ones that I thought I maybe just run through. So, and the first one, the SIAM model and the team. So again, I think, and some of these may be obvious, but they really were quite impactful for us when we set up the original contract. And as we're working through that and collapsing or putting our arms around more and more services and vendors, these are the ones that stuck out to me. So first of all, I suppose, is what type of SIAM do you want? What is the size and the structure? Going back to that model, or the chart I showed you with our team, one of the things that we're looking at and have looked at in the last year is how we handle demand and resources. So one of the things I would strongly recommend is looking at that flex that you need to think about. Where's your demand coming from? For us right now, we took away things like the major incident management team. So our numbers are now dropping significantly what we had in, say, 2022, which means we can have weeks where we have no major incidents, or we could have weeks where we have 10. So that gives us a lot of capacity issues. What do we do with the MIM team? You must have a certain amount. And as we progress and get to that, shift left side of the operation, and how we're starting to now produce bottlenecks into things like problem and CSI. So what the team have done in HCL is now looking at realigning major incident and problem far more closely, so that the MIM team will do the cold handover or the warm handover, and they will be far more involved. So they're now clubbed together, and we're starting to see that utilization of resource spread across MIM and problem. So make sure you've got economies of scope as well as scale in there. The other thing that I think you need to work on closely, and I think is around the service transition and making sure that you're working aligned very much with the transition team to understand the demand that's coming. That's caused us a lot of problems as well, because it's such a dynamic environment. There is a PMO, there are processes, there are service design processes, AIS processes, but it's very hard to keep on top of them. So you need to make sure that the team is very much aligned, and you're all over new demand, new services, what that's going to mean for your team. Where you can, I think, build in that flex option. You may need 4 extra major incident managers for a hypercare project. Then you need to drop down again. Then they may need to work on something else. So build that in where possible, and I think you'll get a lot more gain out of it. In terms of the process orchestration and efficiencies, again, something that Caroline mentioned around the tiering. So we have seen a lot more benefit now as we tier not both our vendors and our services. So when we started our contract, we probably had defined about, I don't know, maybe up to 30 individual vendors. Of those, there may be 8 to 10 that are strategic vendors. Where we found we were not getting a lot of efficiency was the team were doing a great job setting up operational review boards, running all the processes every week, sending the chasers, etc. But you need to question what's the value add for a lot of those vendors. And what we found is a lot of paperwork, a lot of really good work been done, but you need to ask what's the value of that output. And we've started to find that only now we're looking at a lot of the problems that are produced, problem reports, MIR reports, make sure that there's a value add, because there's not just resource time that you're sucking up on your SIAM team. There's resources in other suppliers and within the business. Who signs it off? Do they really use it? What's the outcome? If it isn't producing an activity, if it's not doing any value add, I would question it. And we've got an awful lot more benefit from starting to make those changes. And that includes things like, what do we not need a problem for? We also need to do an awful lot of work on classification of priorities. So again, we're burning up an awful lot of, we have been burning up a lot of MIM time with incidents that really shouldn't be classified as P1 or P2. And they are historic. And again, because we have different reaches around different parts of the world, different vendors, historic behavior or stakeholder expectation in one region may be very, very different to another. So that's why you need to think about what the efficiencies are. Can you reclassify your priorities? Do you need to tweak them for local requirements? But I would really question, make sure that you're questioning the value of all those process outputs. Innovation is another area I think we probably didn't pay enough attention to in the first 2 years of our roadmap. For us, we have a number of, not just HL, but we have a number of global service providers, IT experts. We're not really driving or putting enough attention on innovation. And what we found work now is that we set monthly and quarterly targets. We have formal meetings, we have formal reviews, and again, I would ensure that you're building that in upfront in terms of your weekly and your monthly meetings. You may not need to do it every week, you may not need to do it every month, but ensure that you have a proper schedule for what innovations are coming from your SIAM team, what are the best practices, what are other people doing out there. As I say, in our case, we've got lots of big providers, and they have lots of other customers and accounts. Bring it to the table. Make sure that you formally have innovation meetings, at least I would say once a quarter, if not monthly, and they will make all the difference. And no more than what we're doing now. What are others doing? Networking has been massively beneficial for us, finding out how other people do major incident management, finding out how other people do change management. And so, it is all about collaboration. Orchestration is used a lot with SIAM. You can't do that without collaboration. So make sure that you've got that reach out to others. Make sure that you're driving the innovation agenda. And the last one I'd say at this point is managing the team. Like any other team, it really needs to be developed. And if you're going to be successful, you have to involve the team. You have to align them with your goals. Make sure that you're celebrating successes and failures. And also, like any other team, succession planning. We've got a very good team. I've got a very good lead. So I've been lucky. But there's always going to be people who come and go. You need to make sure that you've got succession planning that will align with your upcoming demand. You're going to have star performers. You need to make sure they're engaged, and you need to think about when they leave. So again, in my experience in other accounts and other places, that tends to be a lob it over the fence and forget about it. But the SIAM team is like any other team and needs to be developed and looked after. The next sort of batch is around the supplier orchestration. Again, this may sound very obvious, but a lot of our problems were around early understanding of vendor contracts and ensuring that you engage vendor management as early as possible. So the problems we encountered here were the fact that we can't just let the SIAM team off. We have a myriad of services, different types of services, different types of vendors. So a network contract is inherently different from an application contract. Some vendors won't adhere to standards problem processes. Others won't want to integrate with you. You need to think about all of these things up front and assess the contracts and work with the right stakeholders to set the team up for success. Again, it goes a little bit back to I suppose the tiering that I was talking about, but things like setting up service credits, your governance reporting, all of those need to be understood. And I think if you have one, early engagement with vendor management is essential. Tiering I've mentioned, and also we suffer from certain pockets in the business where historically there's been grey IT. So for the SIAM team to be able to fully manage is a bit of a challenge, and you have to come up with some solutions around that. How do you handle, for instance, vendors where there's no formal contract, where there may not be integration with ITSM tooling, it might be expensive, the reporting is manual. So you need to think about those things up front before assuming the SIAM team can go off and manage those for you. Some things you can outsource if there's a problem, other things you can't. And grey IT and lack of an engagement or a good relationship with a vendor, you'll need to support them and ensure that they're set up for success. I think I've mentioned service transition. Again, we've got a good team in there now, but it's been historically a difficult area because of the pace of change. So we need to make sure that the SIAM team is working very closely with the transition team and with the projects office, because there's constantly changes to services, there's constantly new services and potentially SLAs and onboarding. And again, it goes back to, I guess, the sizing of your team, dealing with peaks and troughs. You may need to up change management, you may need to up knowledge management for peaks. But keeping on top of that sort of demand pipeline and change is going to be very helpful if you can. Standardize engagement where it fits and adapt to a requirement. Again, this is similar, I think, to the process orchestration. And we've learned a lot as we've taken on different services and different vendors in different parts of our global estate. So again, here what's worked for us is we may find with one vendor, one call a month to look at all processes enough. For other vendors or other services, we may have a dedicated incident review or problem review. So, standardization is great, but in the real world, that may not always work. So for us, for example, when we moved into the US, we decided to quickly move away from individual process calls and reviews into bundling with the key vendors and the key stakeholders in the US once a week for an hour. And that really worked. So again, question everything. Do you need it? Is the output of the process that the SIAM team are running for you, is it adding value? If it's not, don't do it, because it's burning your resource, it's burning the SIAM resource and probably other partner resources. Last one then, service governance and reporting. Same thing for me here again, keep it very simple. We have just in one application vendor, for example, TCS, they manage 80 applications. There are 25 service levels associated with those in varying degrees of buckets. The temptation when you start off is that everyone wants more and more SLAs, more and more KPIs, more and more service credit. They all have to be managed. And we very, very quickly found that lots maybe press a button and it spits out a service now at the end of the month, but there are lots that will always need some manual intervention. Things like accountability for service credits, accountability for root cause. So the more you have in there, the more you're going to need to manage. So my advice would be to keep it simple, only focus on what's important and don't get bogged down with the more KPIs I have, the more SLAs I have, the better, because there's an overhead with that. Likewise, if you can't report, you can't measure. So for us, we had an awful lot of work to do, and we still do on our foundation data, but just make sure that for setting up success for the SIAM team, you've got to be able to report on it. Some may be manual, some may be all automated, but you need to ensure you've got the right data and ensure you've got a clear understanding of the stakeholder RACI within that, who signs off things like SLAs, who signs off service credits, who's going to review and sign off a problem report or a risk, etc. All of those things will add on a lot more complexity. Engaging the right stakeholders. Again, I think there's a similar theme here, but be efficient. We found that there was a lot of similar meetings happened until we really got our arms around everyone, and we probably could have done a much better job kind of doing a bit of a roadshow on what SIAM, what can we do for you, how is this going to work. We're getting much better at that now, but it took us quite a while to realize that there was lots of other meetings going on. So you need to think about duplication, and again, back to, is there value? Constantly question it, constantly reinvent how you're doing your processes, who you're pulling into stakeholder meetings or operational review boards. Are you duplicating anything? Are other suppliers within the ecosystem duplicating? Because they may also be reducing reports, monthly decks, etc. So again, just keep an eye on that. And for us, we found that there was lots of efficiencies to be had. Focus on the value add and KPIs. Again, we're trying to get away from those governance meetings across the board where it's 100 pages of green. You don't need to do that. Just focus on the KPIs, the CSIs, what's broken, and then what's our value add, where do we want to be going. So they were kind of the main kind of areas where I think we've learned our lessons and we're tweaking. And finally, then I think for us, where are we going? What's our next steps? So as we get towards that target operating model, which will most likely change anyway, but fundamentally for us, this is where we're going. There may be some nuances, but again, that theme of shifting from reactive to proactive and value add, maturing our model, and a key focus for us is probably knowledge, problem, and CSI. So I think where we're trying to define and flesh out the roadmap is around incident and MIM. I think is in good shape, but we've more to do there. I think we can automate a lot more, get a lot more slick. We've an awful lot of work to do on tooling. We have ServiceNow. AI was mentioned again. That's always at the back of the mind. What can we do? Are we going to look at it next year for things like creating our knowledge articles and helping with that whole shift left. Foundation data, still working on that and working with the architects to make sure that we end up, our end state is integrated with their tooling, which I think is RDoc, so that we're never in a position where ServiceNow is lagging with the right service commitments, the right service information, getting our CMDB in shape so that we can have good defined service model and full service mapping. A lot of work in that, but again, that's the ideal end state. Change or moving to DevOps. Knowledge and service request automation is a key one for us. I think we've had something like a quick review on ServiceNow identified something like 140 automations. We've something like 3,000, 4,000 manual access requests every year. Huge amount of automation opportunities for us, but we've got to prioritize that and get the CMDB and the foundation data set up so that we can do that, but with massive gains, I think, on that one. And then again, as per the conversations earlier, I'll be nicking some of those slides too around SLA to XLA. And our focus then, our outcomes hopefully will be that reduce all the bad stuff going down, MTTR, MTBF. One of the key asks of SIAM from our exec is reducing reliance on Primark resource. So we've made a lot of progress in that in terms of our updates, things like major incident management, where the guys are taking on more and more, including things like the end user comms, flexible change to work with our evolving product model. And then there's that again, the shift left focus for us. Want to get away from phones and using dynamic language translation in ServiceNow, and automating as much as we can, really. So that's kind of where our next steps are. That's quite a bit away, but we've made some good inroads. So that's really our journey to date. I hope that was of some use. And yeah, I'll stop there if anyone has any questions.
Amazing stuff. Thanks very much indeed, Neil. I mean, there's such a lot of practical, useful tips that have come out of that session.